My first job was when I was 5 years old. That was working on a chicken farm. I had my first industrial accident at 7 years old and still have a damaged fingernail as a result of it. Basically went from a culture where safety didn't exist, not even knowing anything about safety, to now being able to lead it. We had the traditional model of name, blame, shame, and retrain. You would doubt who touched it last. They were the one who got blamed. They had to stand up in front of the group and tell everybody how they messed up, and then you would punish them and retrain them, and then nothing would change. Instead of asking, why did you stick your hand in that machine? Change the question to, can you tell me the story of how you ended up sticking your hand into the machine? And just that small switch changes it from being an aggressive, you messed up, what did you do wrong, to I want to understand the context and can you help me understand it? Physical safety and psychological safety really go hand in hand because you have to have a comfort level where when something's going wrong that you can go to one of your leaders and talk about it, know that they're not going to yell at you because you brought them news that they didn't want to hear. I think of it like a nice hard loaf of bread where you've got a crunchy crust and then it's soft inside. Once you get to know them and gain their trust, then they're willing to open up to you. I can't measure all of the incidents and injuries that haven't happened because of all the good things that we put into place, but I hope I leave a legacy of kind of like an orchard where you plant it today and you see the best results a long time in the future.
Every leader has a story to tell, and the Safe Leader podcast uncovers the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. Join me, your host, Mark McBride-Wright, as we hear from business leaders, academics, entrepreneurs, and agents of change as they share their journeys of innovation, resilience, and transformation. Together, we explore how they embrace the principles of safe leadership, sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering to create safer, more inclusive environments for everyone. Hello, welcome to the next episode of the Safe Leader podcast. I am your host, Mark McBride-Wright, and today I am joined by David Garner, who is a certified safety professional, a certified hazardous materials manager, and a safety management practitioner. He is the Environment, Health and Safety Director at Walden Environmental Engineering, bringing over a decade of hands-on experience in environmental health and safety leadership across manufacturing, architecture, military, and nutrition sectors. Known for building strong safety cultures from the ground up, David previously served as EHS manager at Glanbia Nutritionals, where he reduced recordable injuries by 2/3 within 2 years and developed foundational programs at a site with no previous safety infrastructure. His work at Nucor Steel included building a safety culture that went 37 months without a recordable injury and leading corporate audits across a dozen sites in 9 states. David was instrumental in managing the first ever OSHA-approved lockout-tagout variants, a landmark achievement in industrial safety. His diverse background includes roles in architecture, the National Guard, agriculture, and fish farming, giving him unique hazard awareness and cross-disciplinary insight. David is a certified hazardous materials manager, OSHA trainer, and ISO 14001 auditor with deep regulatory experience, including the Food and Drug Administration, the Department of Transportation, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and local permitting agencies. Today, he uses that breadth to provide full-spectrum EHS consulting and compliance support to businesses and governments. David, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining the podcast. So, you and I met when I was living stateside a few months ago, and we connected on this shared passion of safety.
Absolutely. we had a great event where we partnered with the Boulder Group, and we're learning about how to implement both communication and safety together and how they go hand in hand with one another.
It was a great event. It was a great event that, and we can come on to that in a moment. But I like to start off and grounding ourselves in the podcast with understanding the motivations about the person in front of us, person in front of me, and thinking about the learning arc that you've been on, what you've experienced to get to where you're at now, what influences you've had that led you to pursue a career in safety. So if we can just get in a little mental time capsule and go back and meet the young David, tell us about him. Are you doing now what he thought he would be doing in the future?
The young David, probably not. Um, so going back in my arc, my first job was when I was 5 years old,
Oh, wow.
and
Young.
that was working on a chicken farm. And I had my first industrial accident at 7 years old, and still have a damaged fingernail as a result of it.
No way.
Uh, but basically went from a culture where safety didn't exist. And growing up, did lots of hazardous work as a child and a teenager, and uh, there was kind of no history of safety there. And slowly, as I grew through my life and experienced more things and was exposed to more companies and more places, grew from not even knowing anything about safety to now being able to lead it.
Fantastic. And so what it, what was your moment then that made you think, yeah, there's something in this discipline? Like, did you come into it by chance, or were you working in a high hazardous sector? Because you've got a really probably the most one of the broadest backgrounds I've met of a person in quite a long time in terms of all the sectors that you've covered. So was you mentioned the military there, were you serving in the military early on, and this is when you discovered safety within that context? And tell us a bit about how you discovered it.
The military was probably one of the first places where I worked, and it actually had safety training that was a dedicated part of it. And
Okay.
uh, but because it was my first introduction to safety, I was able to follow it, but it really didn't kind of become a core of who I was at that time.
Okay.
And probably the first time that I worked somewhere that safety became super important and was voluntary was when I was working at an architecture firm in Alaska. And they had a safety committee. It was the first time I'd worked somewhere with a safety committee. It was uh, first time that we'd done evacuation drills and earthquake drills and things like that. And uh, so that's a probably a big uh, tip into doing all the other things that led me into the safety career.
And how have you found then across? Can you take us on that journey then across those different contexts that you've worked in, and how safety has been present in each of those different industries? You've got architecture, agriculture, the military, fishing, I think was mentioned in the introduction. Um,
Um,
yeah,
Fish farming.
fish farming.
So, as I said, I've been working since I was a child, and I've been paying taxes since I was 11 years old. Every year since then, I've paid taxes. And so a lot of those were weekend or summer jobs where I was doing tree work, or I worked for a seed and feed store for one summer, uh, and they had large fish farming operation, both that they were selling fish to other farmers to stock their ponds, but also they were growing them for sale. And uh, basically, very little safety and lots of accidents. I didn't recognize them at the time as accidents, lots of near misses, and I still bear a few scars from my time working there. And as I got into high school, I saw that I really enjoy construction, and I really didn't want to be one of the 40-year-old people with broken bodies that I saw working all around me.
Okay.
And I'm like, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? And that's when I decided that I wanted to go into architecture. But also, I came from a fairly poor background. And so uh, I saw the National Guard as a way to be able to serve the country, but also be able to help fund my education. And so, 7 days after my 17th birthday, I joined the National Guard on a delayed entry program and uh, was able to finish out my senior year of high school and then go off to military training. Uh, when I left high school, uh, or left high school, when I left university, had an architecture degree and went and worked in architecture for several years. And through the 0809 market crash, architecture jobs kept getting scarcer and scarcer. And by 2011, I wasn't able to find any more work in the architecture field and ended up getting hired by Nucor Steel at one of their metal buildings plants, uh, doing drafting work for the erection drawings and the shop drawings for metal buildings. I was at their office location and their plant was 9 hours away, and uh, I got involved in the safety committee through the office location, but it's a little bit more limited in what you can do there. And then about a year into my employment with them, they decided they needed to get better communications between the office and the plant and opened up the opportunity to move with the company and move to the plant location. And they wanted to set up engineers and detailers there and basically said, if you go, you'll have more opportunity for professional growth. And in that, I ended up getting involved with the safety committee at the plant location. And within a year, I was leading the safety committee there. And the position became available for the uh, safety coordinator at that position. And we were in the middle of our worst year in a decade. And uh, I took on the role and really didn't have a background in safety. I knew how to read and interpret codes and rules based on my history with architecture,
Yeah.
and I knew how to relate to people. But as far as formal safety training, I didn't have any.
Right.
And the company had 6 recordable injuries in the uh, first 9 months of the year, and in that fourth quarter, we had 6 more. So it was a real trial by fire. And through gaining the buy-in with the team, uh, we were able to turn that around. And the next year we had 4. The next year we had uh, 2, and it was a very rapid improvement.
So how did you take it then from the place where it was, where you were having 12, I guess, in that 12 months, from what you said, and then to having then none within um 37 months? How did you
But
do?
the 37 months was actually at another location.
Right.
But uh, it was mostly about 2 things. It was about getting employee engagement and giving them the opportunity to do the things that they were passionate about that contributed to safety. And it was about uh, getting better incident reporting and getting better corrective actions out of our incidents.
Okay. Okay. And was there a culture previously of blame or like a lack of trust, or because sometimes you hear that things are happening but people aren't reporting, and so there's a whole sort of mystery set of events that are or things that are occurring that you're just not seeing because they're not getting reported. Did you have to have a phase of trust building between leadership and shop floor workers? Was that in the mix?
Absolutely. We had the traditional model of name, blame, shame, and retrain.
Yeah.
You would, about who touched it last, they were the one who got blamed. They had to stand up in front of the group and tell everybody how they messed up, and then you would punish them and retrain them, and then nothing would change. And it was not uncommon to come out onto the floor and see a handrail that had been dented by a crane load or a forklift,
Mm.
but nothing got reported. And so we had to build more trust in the team. And part of that was showing them when they did report issues, we were actually addressing the root causes and not trying to fix the people instead of fixing the system.
Yeah.
And part of that was we got the safety committee involved in reviewing the incidents with the supervisors and the people that were there. So once a month we had a meeting and we reviewed the uh, incidents, but it was led by the safety committee, and they were trying to determine, is this an effective solution to this problem, or
Right.
are we just punishing people and not fixing the system?
Do you find
And that
something?
helped. Go
Do you
ahead.
find, well, do you find sometimes when you do that root cause analysis that you don't actually get to the root of the problem?
Well, you said root cause, and almost never is there just one root
Yeah.
cause. And that was definitely one of the issues. The mentality at the time was follow the five whys, and you ask why five times and you get to the root cause. But often that maybe gets you one of the multiple causes, but you have to understand what happened in the incident in context of what was happening, what the employee was thinking. And
Mm.
until you get to the point where you would make the same, or maybe not you make the same decision, but you understand how they chose to make that decision, you really don't understand what was happening and the full scope of what's going on. And when you investigate in that level of detail, by the time you get to the time where the incident happened, you already know that it was going to happen and why it was going to happen and what was contributing to it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So there's almost like an expanded um layer or approach needed when you're doing that sort of investigation to then think about the context, the communication, the culture, the and I guess this is where we met, the session on communication and behavior fits so nicely into like safety culture and the sort of things that are perceived currently as the fringes of safety culture, because we think we just need to look at the core technical things that went wrong. But actually, there's so much more in those shadows, isn't there? Do you think we're doing that enough? Like, are our tools and processes and methods and approaches and mindset within the safety community are we bringing process safety leadership into that way? Like, are we putting light on challenging the norms of the past, like doing a five whys investigation and then being surprised that it happens again? Are we training people up in alternative ways, complementary ways?
I think that we're making progress, but we've still got a long ways to go to get it to be the industry standard. Um, I work in a lot of different facilities now as a consultant, and I still see companies using the traditional five whys and still blaming employees and not fixing the system. And so we've still got long ways to go to be able to transition to really treating safety as part of the system and fixing the systems, because most often, yes, the employee made what looks like a choice, but when you look at it in the context of the system that they were operating in, they were making the choice that the system decided that they could make.
Yeah,
And uh, a lot of our decisions are controlled by the systems that we're working within.
yeah. So the five whys is obviously really popular because it's been done lots of times and it's by virtue of scale and frequency, it's become a standard, or a common approach. What alternative tools, mechanisms, strategies are you using to complement that? Like, or is it case by case? It's more nuanced. Like, do we even have anything yet that helps do a really good, broader root cause analysis that unearths these other contexts?
I try to meet people and companies where they're at, and some are ready for different levels of it. And so, if you're just always done the five whys, I might suggest that instead of asking, why did you stick your hand in that machine? Change the question to, can you tell me the story of how you ended up sticking your hand into the
Right,
machine?
right.
And just that small switch changes it from being an aggressive,
Hmm.
you messed up, what did you do wrong, to I want to understand the context and can you help me understand it? A little further down the road, we can change it from a five whys to a wishbone diagram so
Hmm.
that you got lots of different um uh, things that are feeding into it.
Yeah,
But the best way that I've seen to change it is to one, change the language from incident investigation to a learning team. And so it's an event, it's not an incident. And the entire goal of the learning is just that learning.
hmm,
It's not to blame and punish, it's to learn as much as we can from that event. And with that, you're trying to get the employees who were involved as part of it. You're trying to get leadership as part of it. You're trying to get engineering as part of it. You're
yeah,
getting everybody who this is either designing the system, operating the system, or affected by the system as a conversation. And you start at the beginning of the day and work all the way through all the issues that you found. And in normal work, the employees are doing so many things where they're having to manage the risk throughout the day. The procedure as written can almost never be followed the way it's written
yeah,
because depending on the wear on the equipment or the type of part that you're running or a hundred other variables, they're having to make changes and make decisions that they're keeping the equipment running, but you never know that because it just looks like they're doing their job.
yeah,
And uh, if you don't dig in, but then you uncover challenges about, oh, this tool doesn't work well.
yeah,
This software is frustrating. I'm running out of this and I have to leave my station to go chase down someone in shipping to bring me more boxes to put things in.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
a traditional investigation that starts 5 minutes before something happens, you're never going to capture all of that. And by expanding the scope of what you're learning about, you have so many more opportunities to learn and get better. And you get so much more buy-in because people see when something happens, instead of getting smacked,
yeah.
they get their life gets easier, their production gets easier, their frustrations start going away, and uh, it helps with production, it helps with quality, it helps with safety. And learning teams have been so successful that all those departments and more have stolen it as an idea for them to solve problems that they have.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think that's really good, and it's essentially then shifting to that just culture idea where I love that. I think it's so powerful that re rebranding safety internally to be an advisory support function than an accusatory police type function. Um, doesn't mean we're
Absolutely. I
doesn't
was
mean
going to
we're,
say,
yeah,
in my past, I've always treated my role as to be a support. I'm a resource for the team. The
yeah,
supervisors are the ones who day to day have to enforce the safety and make sure everybody's following the rules. If I'm walking around and I'm seeing someone not wearing their PPE, I'm going to absolutely tell them, hey, you need to put your safety glasses on or whatever it is.
yeah.
But my job isn't to write them up for not wearing those safety glasses. My job is to be a resource to help them solve problems.
So where then this is interesting. So, my work's all about trying to expand then into the what someone's thinking, the brain. Like, they're physically present, but are they mentally absent? Are they fully showing up? Are they preoccupied with other things in their mind? How are individuals connecting? What are the interrelationships like between the workers on the plan or the designers in the office and the support functions, etc.? Like, what's the dominant culture and the subculture, and where are their tension points? And this is where, diversity, equity, inclusion, like creating an inclusive culture for everyone, irrespective of your background and origin, etc., really comes into play, because I question whether or not we have inclusive cultures in some of these environments where we have a majority white male workforce. Construction manufacturing has a very high suicide rate in the United States, as well as here in the United Kingdom. So how can you give us your thoughts on those comments I've just made with regard to the culture of the sectors within which you're now working? Do you think there's an opportunity for safety to pick up some of the fallout of culture programs, perhaps? Or have we missed a trick up until now, like not really making safety also encompass with the same scrutiny, psychological safety as physical safety?
I think physical safety and psychological safety really go hand in hand because you have to have a comfort level where when something's going wrong, that you can go to one of your leaders and talk about it and know that they're not going to yell at you because you brought them news that they didn't want to hear, that their concern is for you as a person and how they can help you be the best you can be.
Yep.
And uh, really, that's kind of been my whole mindset when it comes to safety is people first, even above meeting compliance. It's what takes care of the people first. And so if you do that, then you're going to end up being fairly compliant. But it also allows you that freedom to see what the people need. And in my mind and in my experience, having diverse backgrounds and diverse people makes for a stronger organization, and we learn more, we know more, the more people that we include in that. And you mentioned the suicide rate. I do a lot of work in the aerospace industry, and the aerospace industry actually has a suicide rate that's over 3 times as high as just standard manufacturing. And it's one of the highest in the country, and uh, something that unfortunately we hear about all too often.
And are businesses doing anything about it?
Some are. I think that uh, I know that you've got a group in the UK that is trying to do more about it among engineers,
Mhm.
and I think something like that could definitely help here. But uh, individual organizations, it depends on where their culture's at. Some, like I said, have addressed it, but most have not.
What I find really interesting about the US in particular, because, you know, putting aside for a moment all the executive orders and that came out in February and have affected, what businesses are confident to do or not do. Um, the US are world leading when it comes to supporting veterans, for example, when they leave veteran life and move into civilian life. And I believe that this group of people as well also have a high rate of loss of life or mental ill health, things that from what they've been through in the military as they then transition out of that life. Um, like being supported and nurtured and cared for. Um, it's a strong part of American culture, like looking after those who've served. Um, and like even when it comes to, well, affirmative action and diversity law and what have you, I think, you can still legitimately have programs that support veterans, into the workforce and what have you. So I wonder if there's stuff that can be learned from that, if those mechanisms are still being effective or whether they even were effective. I don't know. Because it's a lot of people. There's a large potential talent pool there of people that would have brilliant skills that could then transfer into an engineering, a manufacturing, a construction context. Yes, okay, it might still be majority male, which doesn't help our other diversity demographics and diversifying, but it could really help challenge the persona that, and I might be stereotyping here, that we expect an engineer to be stoic, to be highly technical, to not be vulnerable, to not lead with empathy, very numbers focused, that stereotype of a typical engineer, which I don't really agree with from the people that I've met. Um, but I wonder if it plays out in majority male teams. Definitely when I've delivered training or visited sites and the composition of the group has been majority male, so you've got a lot of masculine energy there. There there is a it is harder to break through that to get to what's going on in here and in here in the heart. Um it's quite surface level leadership than deep, emotional leadership. So I think there must be some way for what we do in safety leadership to pick up on some of that.
I agree. I think of it like a nice, uh, hard loaf of bread where you've got a crunchy crust and then it's soft inside.
Yeah,
In my experience, those heavy industrial people, they really focus on putting an exterior that's hard to the outside world, and they're completely okay. But having lived and worked with them for over a decade, they have needs just like everyone else. And once you get to know them and gain their trust, then they're willing to open up to you. I've been counselor to many a person who came to me with problems and trying to work through it, and just having that support and openness that I was willing to listen and willing to help them and direct them to wherever they needed to be if I couldn't give them the help that they needed. You first have to gain the trust, and I think part of that is being embedded with the team and seeing them on a very regular basis. Uh, if there's a new EHS person out there, my biggest recommendation is go spend a week, a month, as much as you can get away with working on the floor side by side with the workers. It'll teach you what the hazards are, but it'll gain their trust. And they've never seen people who are responsible for safety who are willing to go out and work side by side with them and see what they experience. And that will be a very quick way to get that buy-in and get
yeah,
that trust.
that's great. That's great advice. That's great advice. What could we be doing at a national level then? Is there some sort of training program we could roll out to try and cultivate this mindset in the engineers of tomorrow, as well as the engineers of today, or the EHS professionals of tomorrow? What what can we do to sort of catalyze this change?
Hmm. I think part of it is as we switch from basically the name, blame, shame, and retrain type to a learning culture, part of that comes with we treat people differently as we learn not only about the work that we're doing, but more about the people. And so, at least in my world, that would make the biggest difference. And so, switching more to a focus on learning and less on a focus on uh, you messed up, we're going to write you up, and then
Yeah.
everything's good.
I wonder if there's also something in This is where my chemical engineering brain comes in. I think in terms of control loops, feeding forward and feeding back and making changes and waiting for the delay to see the outcome of the change that you made, etc. And I do wonder what, rather than just bringing people into the same context and not changing the culture of what we have today, we need to be doing that. But then what can we do for investment in the future for the talent that's coming in next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And therefore, that means turning and looking at our education system, the universities, the colleges, that are training our future EHS professionals and engineering professionals. What tweaks do we need to make to the learning experience that they're going through in terms of what good, progressive, inclusive management and leadership looks like? I wonder if that's even happening.
At least when I went through school, that wasn't part of the conversation. And I would love to see that be included in our education. And it's the kind of thing that just being exposed to it plants that seed. And it may take it 10 years, 20 years to grow into a fully formed tree where you're getting everything out of it that you're wanting. But if you don't plant those seeds today, you'll never get to where you want to get in 10 or 20 years.
Maybe there's a moral imperative for us as industry leaders to be sowing those seeds um, as part of our education engagement. Um, we run some, we've barely touched the surface of the scale of intervention that's needed, here in the UK anyway. But I'm trying to bring in engineers here and there to give like guest speaking lectures at universities, and industrialists get excited when they get to come back and talk about what they do, and share pictures of the site. And the students love it as well, because what I often find with students is that their perception of what an engineer does or what a professional does is limited to the academics that they're around every day. And usually academics have only ever worked in academia. They've never actually worked out in, industry or stuff. So it's such a nice opportunity to have the individuals share a bit about themselves. And then we could take it a layer deeper to do like mentoring, group mentoring or one-to-one mentoring even. And just really build that scaffold that relationship, which then might help with attraction and retention. I think I just think we operate a lot in mental silos, and don't ever zoom out and think about the big picture. Um,
Yeah, again, even if it's just academia versus industry, that diversity of just bringing more groups together makes us stronger. And I've actually had a lot of benefit from different mentors throughout my life, and that mentoring relationship and building that culture of just having someone that you can go to and ask, hey, I've got this problem, how can I best address it, really pays off in the long run.
Definitely, is that support in your pocket. I WhatsApp is my go-to for, if I've got an issue or need some help. I've got, everyone who I trust implicitly in a particular field or domain, and I can message them at any point, to get that answer, get that support. And you need that for developing yourself and for your professional development and mental well-being as well. Having that mentorship for people who've done it before is good. Do you know actually of any resources that where safety has embraced the AI revolution, and any tools that can surface up lessons learned from historical past incidents?
So there's a few out there. Some of the most useful are ones that, instead of having a drop down box on your incident report that says that this was related to machine guarding or it was whatever category it is, You just put in the narrative of what you found, and then they will come up with the categories after the fact and be able to go through that data. And so it doesn't pigeonhole you into, oh, you've only got these 10 options to categorize what's the root causes. Instead, you give the narrative and the story. And again, it's about the context instead of just the, okay, it was a pinch point injury or it was a
Right.
laceration injury.
And is there software being developed that pulls together learnings from national accidents, Deepwater
Not that I'm
Horizon,
aware of yet.
right?
Hopefully we'll get there, but right now those are usually implemented by, at best, large companies and pulls data from all of their incidents
There,
within the large
right,
company.
yeah, right. That was my next point. Or is it more within the confines of this site or this refinery or this manufacturing plant? We're gonna pull off our, major accident hazard reports and our OSHA submissions and whatever we've got, and then we've got it all input. Some sort of, I mean, notwithstanding liability and legal and all that kind of can of worms, but you almost want something where, with the intention of creating good and avoiding loss of life in the future, all of that data from every plant in the United States and globally is just pulled into one big system that can then surface up things that have happened in different places and what happened and how it was dealt with and what not to do, lessons that were learned from the action that was taken.
Unfortunately, because of legal liability, a lot of companies are really reluctant to share incident data. There was a big story that was in the papers, and uh, there was a nurse at Vanderbilt University who pulled the wrong medicine and administered it to a patient, and the patient ended up dying as a result. And when you go back and look at it, the system was set up to cause failure, and she just happened to be the unlucky one who uh, happened to be the poster child. And in that case, she ended up getting prosecuted and convicted and sent to jail as a result. But other medical institutions had the exact same systems and the exact same problems and the exact same risk of patients getting injured. And they weren't willing to share that this was a problem and talk about it among different medical institutions because of the fear of getting sued for, uh, oh, you messed up. And that's happening with all the different industries. And some industry organizations, they have where they get together, and in safety, a lot of us treat it as R&D means rip off and duplicate. If you've got a problem and we can learn from it, we're going to rip off your solution and we're going to duplicate it. We'll change it enough to make it our own, but uh, there's nothing that I keep as proprietary in safety. It's about how can I help people go home the way
Yeah.
they came in.
So the best halfway house, I guess, that we can do is to be sharing within our community lessons learned, do a deep dive into how we executed that broader 5 why approach by reframing questions and seeing a different outcome and like sharing it out there to help. I went to Safety on the Edge in Berkeley, California. It was the first time the conference was ran. Um, and it was absolutely brilliant. There was a fantastic keynote from Kim Green, who's the chief executive at Southern Power Company, I think, one of the utilities down in the southern, one of the southern states. And I learned so much from it. I learned so much. I've been applying like some of what she said to client work that I've been doing. And because she presented a great case study in where they thought they were recording the right incidents, the right data. They were seeing a trend line go down, But actually, they were creating a culture where people just weren't reporting. And so they then set about changing how reporting was done. Obviously, data started to go up, but it meant that um, the fatality rate, I think, started to go down because they were actually seeing recordable incidents going up, but they were then able to implement mechanisms that would prevent serious fatality or serious injury happening. So then, that went down, which isn't something that a board always wants to see, changing.
I've had to fight against that at every site I've been at because one of my first goals is to increase near miss reporting. And one site that I was at went from 3 the year that I arrived to 38 the next year to 69 the next year. And some of the managers were hair on fire. Oh my God, we're so bad. I'm like, no, we're just hearing about it now.
Yeah,
And these incidents were all happening before. We just didn't know about it. And now we have the knowledge, we've learned from them, we have a chance to get better. And it's not that we're less safe because we're having more incidents. They're almost all near misses. The number of property damages and injuries have gone down. The number of near misses that we get the opportunity with nothing bad happening to learn from has gone up.
yeah,
And the more that you can do those, and we've had some near misses where in slightly different circumstances, they could be fatal
yeah,
incidents.
yeah.
And those are such a valuable opportunity that you have to learn from those and you have to prevent those from happening in the future because none of us want it to be a fatal incident.
So if a client is having, 3 to 4, um, or every 3 or 4 days is having somewhere on its sites, an accident, something that is serious enough that it gets reported, um, and they have an ambition to break the plateau. Their safety performance is sort of plateauing. That tends to show that actually something serious is bubbling away. If these rates aren't on a downward progression, it's a bit counterintuitive to come in and say to them, "Well, look, the rates might even be going up." Well, I guess it's whether or not they're overlaying that data with near miss data, isn't it? Yeah. So the accident.
And near misses aren't quite a leading indicator, but it gets
Yeah.
back into that conversation about having leading indicators versus lagging
Yeah.
indicators. Because with those, if all you're doing is measuring the number of incidents, it's not really giving you any data about where your safety's headed. It's
Yeah.
where your safety's been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if there's a fear of reporting, and there's so many things that can lead into a fear of reporting, it certainly drives down the number of things that get reported, but it's only the things that they can't hide. It's either an injury or a property damage that get reported. And uh, I often see that with companies, they have more injuries and property damage as they have near misses. And to
Mm,
me, at an absolute minimum, you should have more near misses than the other two combined.
right.
And it should probably be more double that because near misses are happening all day, every day. And the way that I define a near miss is anything that gives you that pucker factor. Damn, that was close. I'll have to look out for that in the future. Well,
Yeah.
if I need to look out for it in the future, so does everyone else.
Yeah. 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 Great. I love that. And keeping it simple, defining it in that way, communicating it on posters, and advocating that people submit a hazard observation card or something when they get that experience. That's how you drive up your near miss reporting, isn't it? Or whatever.
That company I was talking about with increasing the near miss reporting, we also were working on hazard observations. And through that time, we went from a couple dozen hazard observations a month to hundreds of hazard observations a month. And in those, we probably got dozens of things that could have been entered as a incident. And instead of, oops, sorry about that. Instead of treating those as a incident at punishing the workers. We made it so that if the worker noticed something and entered it and made sure their supervisor was aware of it, that we considered it a peer-to-peer observation and there was no blame, there was no punishment. And instead, we still would do a learning about it and we would still try to make it uh, uh, as much improvement from it as possible. But we ended up getting, like I said, hundreds over the course of the year of hazard observations that could have been incidents. And uh, so we got even more opportunity to learn. And we still had the increased near miss reporting. And so, again, that feedback loop of the
Yeah.
more you learn and fix, the more that you learn and fix. And uh, the team buys in more and you get more opportunities and it helps to reinforce the system.
Love it. It's actually not that complicated, is it? It's really not complicated. It's just people's egos and personalities and unwillingness to participate that get in the way. Okay. Thinking about your legacy then, and what you're working in, where do you see the shift in change happening in the future? And what role are you playing in helping shape that?
I kind of feel like I'm a little too young to be thinking about my legacy, but uh, it's one of those where I can't measure all the incidents and injuries that haven't happened because of all the good things that we put into place. But I hope I leave a legacy of uh, kind of like an orchard where you plant it today and you see the best results a long time in the future. And I leave a legacy of people who go home uninjured as a result.
Yeah.
Uh, I enjoy gardening and growing fruit trees and other perennial fruits. And so there's a lot of effort that goes into planting things today. And I'm not a patient person, but it teaches you to be patient. And a lot of times you have to plant those seeds on work sites, and it may take it years to grow into what you know that it can be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to have that patience and keep feeding it and keep watering it because nothing about safety ever becomes second nature. You constantly have to reinforce it. You constantly have to have your leaders talking about it.
Yeah.
And if you have a great culture and then you have a change in leadership, a leader that's not leading about safety can ruin a great culture in less than a year.
Yeah.
And you can go from excellence to terrible results in no time. And leadership matters and talking about safety matters. And so I hope my legacy is more spending time developing leaders so that they can continue to feed and water those safety ideas that I'm building. Because when you become a leader, you don't get a training that says, hey, I'm uh, now going from working on the floor to leading people.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's just, oh, you're the uh, best worker and you've got the right attitude. We think you can be a leader. Okay. And
People.
then there's no training on how to deal with people. There's no training on additional safety responsibilities. There's no training on additional HR responsibilities. Just so many new things. And we expect the leaders to just kind of learn on the fly.
Yeah.
But if we create some structure around that and give them the tools to be able to deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and safety, and uh, all the other issues that are going to come, because some people may be young and not have a lot of life experiences when they take on that leadership role. But then
Yeah.
you've got a 50-year-old veteran who's coming to you and talking about their spouse left them this morning.
Yeah.
And how do you build those tools in those people to know how to react and how to respond
Yeah.
and to get the most out of it? And if you can do that, then you get more from your leaders, but then your leaders can help to feed back into that system and strengthen that system.
Oh, David, you've done a perfect uh tee up there for me to do a little plug for the training that I've built out of my book, The Safe Leader, where SAFE stands for Share, Act, Feel, Empower. And it's absolutely about bringing together that inclusive leadership qualities, doing that introspection on what you yourself as a leader have got to share with others that makes you vulnerable, that challenges that stoic stereotype, and therefore mentally opens you up and makes you more accessible to others, and then gifts you the experience of acquiring learned experience about others, what others are going through. And then all of a sudden, your frame of reference, just what your aperture on the world just widens way beyond what you've experienced personally and professionally. And then it makes you a better leader, but you need to keep doing it. So that's why it's a cycle: share, act, feel, empower. Okay. Um, we're rolling that training out now to like different clients here in the UK, and I'm creating a version of it that we can then introduce to universities to embed as part of the curriculum. So, and to your point about planting seeds for the future, if we can get some of the students and apprentices thinking in this way, it means they then bring it into their leadership roles in the future. Quick fire questions. We haven't even touched on Connecticut and like the safety culture in the state and the manufacturing. Can we just talk about that for like a minute? Just, because we met, I didn't realize Connecticut had such a strong manufacturing base and a really strong women in manufacturing sort of community. So can you just tell us a bit about Connecticut and engineering and all that? Because I was on that bus for 2.5 hours coming up to Hartford, to the event, but I'm so glad I did because I met some brilliant people.
Yeah, we actually have a huge manufacturing base here in Connecticut, and it goes back a long ways. In colonial times, it was a huge brass manufacturing location, and through time, the brass often went into ships and into weapons and things like that. And through time, Connecticut's retained a lot of that history. So there's still a lot of aerospace and national defense that happens here. We've got Electric Boat that builds submarines here. We've got Sikorsky. We've got Collins Aerospace and lots of support industries around it. But we've also got lots of highly engineered, like high-end optics and I mean, we work with customers that do everything from just making metals to making finished components for consumers to electronics. And it kind of runs the gamut in Connecticut from someone that's making textiles or buttons to someone who's making lasers that'll be used to do atmospheric monitoring from space. So uh, the state of Connecticut really has a ton of industry. And even for me, I'm often surprised when I go in and see the diversity. I know that you're a big fan of tea, and we've got Bigelow Tea that's based here in Connecticut, and they're one of the largest producers in America of
Right.
teas.
Cool. I'm not a fan of American tea, I must admit.
Well, we all have our biases.
It has been nice getting my Yorkshire brew back home in the UK. Like, actually looks like tea when I squeeze it and make it strong. I jest, I jest. Okay, quick fire questions. What is the most underrated safety risk in today's workplaces?
5 years ago, I probably would have said alternative energy control. You mentioned in the opening about the lockout tagout variants that we had when I was at Nucor Steel. That was the first one in the nation that OSHA had ever released, and as a result of us gaining that and proving that our alternative method was safer than lockout tagout, several other companies started applying for variances, and OSHA decided that instead of rewriting or giving all these variances, they would rewrite the rule. And so they're in the progress of doing that now to include alternative energy control into the regulations instead of tons of variances. So now the other big issue that I'm seeing is uh, a really basic one, and probably it won't surprise you very much coming from a chemical engineering background, but it's chemicals. Lots of the companies we're working with use chemicals that are relatively safe when they're used the appropriate way, but in the wrong combination can create very bad outcomes. And so, uh, I, prior in my experience to the last year and a half, I probably would not have said chemicals being one of those big ones, but yeah,
What's a myth about compliance you'd like to bust?
that compliance is all that you need. That if you're compliant with all the rules, then you'll have a safe work site. I've seen companies that would achieve a safety award that had fatalities because they're following the compliance, but they're not doing the stuff to build the culture so that people live that and go above and beyond.
What's one book or resource you recommend for aspiring safety leaders?
Pre-Accident Investigation by Todd Conklin. It was a book that I found early on in my safety career and was a big part of me being able to learn to put people first and start trying to fix systems instead of trying to fix people.
What's a leadership lesson that you learned the hard way?
I would say probably just because we talk together and we come to a solution that we need to implement to fix something doesn't mean that we leave that conversation with the same understanding of what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so being clear on making sure we're in the same understanding because we both bring our own biases into the conversation. We just have to make sure we're on the same page.
What's your favorite PPE or safety tool you can't live without?
A really comfortable pair of steel-toe boots. If your feet are hurting, everything's liable to end up hurting. But if you get a good pair of boots and invest where it matters, then that's where I
How
get the
do you
most value is.
how do you unwind after a big day at work?
It's either going to be going for a walk with my dogs or doing some kind of woodworking, whether that be building furniture, doing home repairs, carving a spoon, something like that.
Nice. And finally, what's one word that describes your approach to safety leadership?
Context.
Brilliant.
If you don't
Very
understand the context of the people, the systems, the incidents, then you can never fully get the most out of the biggest improvements that are possible.
absolutely. Absolutely. David, I could talk for hours. I've really enjoyed the chat we've had today. If people want to get in touch with you, find out more about your services that you offer or the company you work at, how do they do that?
You can go to waldenenvironmentalengineering.com for my company. If you want to reach out to me personally, then I'm on LinkedIn under my name, David Garner, and the
Perfect.
easiest to find me.
Perfect. Well, we'll put those links in the show notes as well. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. You have been listening to the Safe Leader podcast, uncovering the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. If you have enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the Safe Leader podcast on your podcast platform of choice and get notified when a new episode goes live. Did you know that we also offer a full transcript on each of our podcast episodes? Check out my website, markmcbridewright.com. Here, you can also explore the training, coaching, and keynote speaking services I offer. And whilst you're there, why not join the Safe Leader community by subscribing to the Safe Leader Insights mailing list? Thank you for listening, and please come back and join us on a future episode.